fifth-generation farmer stares at his flooded fields. $100,000 in crops gone, not from weather, from Washington. Trump's tariff war just triggered China to walk away from U.S. agriculture. 12,000 tons of pork canceled. Soybean orders vanished, prices collapsing. And now the same farmers who helped re-elect him, they're going broke. No bailout, no market, no backup. So the real question isn't who they'll vote for. It's whether their farms will survive until the next election. The celebration didn't last long. In January 2025, President Trump imposed a sweeping 10% universal import tariff, promising to protect American jobs. But by March, panic had replaced patriotism in farming towns across Iowa, Illinois, and Kentucky. According to USDA trade data, China, Vietnam, and the EU launched near immediate retaliation, specifically targeting U.S. agriculture, which still accounted for 20.5% of total U.S. exports in 2024. Within weeks, $6 billion worth of contracts were frozen or canceled. Farmers who had already planted spring crops were trapped. Their markets closed overnight. What began as a nationalist trade maneuver rapidly mutated into an internal economic collapse. And this time, the damage is measurable in acres, not rhetoric. But why was agriculture the first target, and what does Brazil have to do with it? On February 12th, China pulled the plug on 12,000 metric tons of U.S. pork imports, marking the largest cancellation since 2020's pandemic disruptions. Days later, Beijing finalized new grain supply deals, with Brazil replacing nearly $14 billion worth of U.S. soybean imports with Brazilian product. USDA's 2024 data shows China now buys less than 21% of U.S. soybeans, down from 40% a decade ago. Meanwhile, Brazil's soybean exports to China grew 26% year over year. According to Bloomberg, Illinois farmer cooperatives are reporting double-digit crop surpluses and plunging futures, and while U.S. exports evaporated, input costs exploded. Fertilizer prices surged by 124% from 2020 levels, and pesticide tariffs added an average $83 per acre to corn production costs. This is economic strangulation, Kansas wheat farmer Vance Mai told Reuters. I lost $30,000 in grain value in 2 days. That's not trade reform. That's carnage. But was this just about pricing, or did U.S. policy sabotage its own growth markets? Corn farmer Kenneth Hartman Jr., who backed Trump in every election, now watches his markets disintegrate. Vietnam and the Philippines, once seen as promising growth destinations for U.S. corn, were hit with 46% and 17% tariffs, respectively, slamming the door on $2.1 billion in annual trade. USDA projections for spring 2025 had anticipated 94 million acres of corn planting. That number is now being revised downward by over 7% as farmers delay seed orders and cancel equipment purchases. Even niche crops aren't immune. Over 6,000 metric tons of U.S. wood pulp were rejected at Chinese ports in April alone, per the Agriculture Transportation Coalition. Large facilities are now overwhelmed. Cold chain distribution is breaking down, and perishable commodities are being discarded en masse. We planted for export. Now we're dumping, Hartman told Bloomberg. But if exports are collapsing and costs are spiking, where's the emergency relief? In 2018, Trump pushed through a $28 billion bailout, but 75% of those funds went to just 10% of farms, mostly corporate giants, according to GAO audits. This time there's no rescue package. USDA's 2025 forecast estimates a $42 billion plunge in net farm income, a 25% year-over-year drop. According to the March 2025 Creighton University Rural Main Street Index, only 58% of U.S. farmers are expected to remain profitable, down from 78% the year before. With the 2018 Farm Bill safety net depleted and the 2025 update still stalled in Congress, the industry is now facing its worst liquidity crunch since 1986. Iowa's Benjamin Rhea, who had planned to double corn acreage this year, has reversed course. He's planting soybeans not for margin, but because they're less financially fatal. Across the Midwest, expansion has stopped. What remains is contraction, consolidation, and survival mode. And this time, farmers aren't waiting quietly for Washington to catch up. Let's freeze the frame. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. Because no one thought the MAGA base would turn this fast. Not in Trump country. Not in counties where loyalty used to be louder than losses. But now the tractors are parked, the signs are coming down, and the silence from Washington is the loudest thing these farmers have heard in years. On April 7th, cotton farmer John Fleming sat in Halifax County, North Carolina, watching prices collapse to $49 per pound below break even. It hurts, I can't deny it, he told Le Monde. He won't plant cotton this year. Trump carried his county by over 60%. Yet Fleming won't reveal his vote again, worried his tractor might be vandalized. According to USDA election mapping, Trump secured majorities in 433 of 444 farming-dependent counties in 2024, often exceeding 75%. But since the tariffs reports of farmers removing Trump signs, refusing GOP donations, or openly criticizing the administration have surged in regional Aggie publications. As MAGA lawmakers echo Fox News lines like, short-term, pain long-term gain disillusionment is spreading. We've had 2 years of flooding falling prices, and now we're a bargaining chip, said Texas sorghum grower Travis Johnson. If this is strategy, who's it working for? But if MAGA counties are breaking ranks, what happens when Congress is forced to pick sides? For the first time in decades, bipartisan lawmakers are pushing to curb the president's trade authority. The Stop Raising Prices on Food Act would prohibit tariffs on the top 5 U.S. agricultural export destinations, aimed directly at salvaging trade with China, Mexico, and Vietnam. Meanwhile, the proposed Trade Review Act would sunset any new tariff within 60 days, unless Congress votes to keep it. Lawmakers backing the bills cite collapsing exports, rising farm bankruptcies, and a USDA projected $42 billion income loss for 2025. At the center of this movement, pressure from agricultural states once considered untouchable Trump territory. The American Farm Bureau now warns that over 1/5 of farm income depends on exports that are rapidly disappearing. But while Washington debates legislation in California's Central Valley produce is already rotting, and no bill will bring back lost time. In the Central Valley, fruit and vegetable farmers are racing against time. Unlike corn or soybeans, their crops can't wait. With port congestion worsening and 15 USDA programs still frozen for review, thousands of tons of fresh produce now sit in limbo. Cold storage space is maxed out. Logistics firms are turning away deliveries, and contracts with China in the EU, previously worth billions, have dried up. Annanite, a citrus farmer with 2 decades of school district contracts, says she's surviving, but others in her cooperative face collapse. According to Politico, over $2.5 billion in agricultural programs remain suspended as the Trump administration conducts anti-DEI and climate compliance reviews. Knight calls the funding cliff very real, and for small growers relying on USDA-linked school lunch programs or food bank contracts, there may be no recovery window left. What's replacing federal support? For many, the answer is nothing. USDA offices across rural America are going dark. According to internal data cited by The Guardian, over 10% of USDA staff accepted buyouts in March, while thousands of probationary employees were laid off, outright gutting the National Resource Conservation Service and Farm Service Agency. This coincides with the abrupt cancellation of the $3.2 billion Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities program, designed to improve soil and air quality on commodity farms. It makes no sense to kill long-term resilience programs, then spend billions fixing the collapse, said Jesse Womack of the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. In Colorado, state agencies issued stop work orders to local climate subgrantees. Unable to confirm if expenses would be reimbursed, USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins defended the cuts, calling the programs Biden-era slush funds. Yet, as funding disappears, farmers are left without the technical support they've relied on to reduce costs and adapt to climate volatility. So what happens when even the safety net is dismantled mid-harvest? On April 6th, 13 inches of rain fell on cotton plant, Arkansas, flooding fields, and stalling spring planting. Community farmer Adam Chappell, who grows corn, soybeans, cotton, and rice, said his crop survived, but his USDA-funded conservation project was frozen for weeks. We're already in a precarious situation, Chappell told The Guardian. If this trade war isn't resolved by harvest, we'll lose a critical mass of producers. Economist Betty Resnick warned that without a revised farm bill or direct USDA support, farmers will almost certainly bear the brunt of these tariffs. Travis Johnson in Texas added, "We're not competing anymore. We're collateral. With China's agricultural imports from the US down 15% year over year, and Brazil filling the vacuum, even traditionally, loyal farmers are now asking, what if the trade war wasn't strategic but self sabotage? If markets don't reopen and bailouts don't arrive, who exactly is winning this war? The numbers are no longer abstract. $42 billion in projected farm income, losses, 15 federal programs frozen, and U.S. agricultural exports to China, down from $29.2 billion in 2023 to $24.7 billion in 2024 per USDA. These aren't just statistics, they're survival margins. And in counties where Trump once commanded 78% of the vote, farmers are quietly asking whether loyalty is being answered with abandonment. The global agriculture map is redrawing itself in real time. Brazil, Argentina, Vietnam, they're not waiting for Washington to course correct. They're building new trade corridors. And U.S. farmers, many are watching their markets, their margins, and their futures evaporate. So if the next farm collapse isn't a fluke, but a feature of this policy, then ask yourself, is rural America finally ready to walk?